Thank you for coming and kind of lending your expertise for us today, Tim. So I'll jump into the questions. I think this was on the earlier model, maybe that model, how you applied the black paint section on the hood. So how you kind of got the, I guess they're asking kind of how you maybe either broke out that section or how you kept the black paint on the hood separate from the other paints.
So yeah, this particular model, this is already separated, but we can obviously do this still even if it was attached. And you're going to attack it the same way as how I showed how we did the tires. I would lay down the red paint first and get that paint the way you want it. And then I would put down another paint and apply that as a label. And then I would have an opacity map to the shape that I want on the car. Does that make sense?
Totally, yeah. And you obviously talked a lot about kind of the different environments and how you dial it in. One person's asking, you know, obviously as you sort of change the environment, you'll get different effects with the paints. Do you kind of have a particular environment that you start with? That's sort of this is my environment that I'm going to dial my paints in on that I know will give me kind of consistent results in other environments?
No, that's a really good question. What I usually do is I do everything in the basic studio that comes when a KeyShot launches. Believe it or not, that is, even though everything's soft, that is a very good dome for lighting purposes, for darks and brights, darks and lights. So I'll do all my materials there, and then I'll apply whatever dome, or if I have to create a dome, and that's when I start creating my domes. Now, of course, when I'm creating the dome, that doesn't mean I'm not going to go back to that material and do little tweaks here and there, but that is a good start.
Great. And then in terms of the models that you're working from, both the tire models and the car models, obviously KeyShot imports a ton of different file formats, over 30 different kind of CAD and DCC file formats. What do you usually get from the manufacturers? Is it usually SolidWorks, or it's just kind of all over the place depending on you know, the part and the manufacturer?
So usually, most cases, the manufacturer, obviously they do their cars in CAD, right? CATIA or SolidWorks, wherever that may be. But then they will convert it to poly. And then usually they have, they call data preppers, and they will prep the model inside Maya or 3ds Max or whatever their workflow is, and then saved out. And then those are the models we get. So it's usually a Maya file. But trust me, I've done cars that are step files too. But a lot of times, the reason why they actually go through that extra step is because the interiors of the cars, that's all soft modeling. That can't be done through CAD. I mean, they have CAD models of it, but it's very hard, stiff, because they just want the shape. So they usually have a modeler go in and model all the soft parts. So it would be your seats, your steering wheel, your armrest, center console, where the leather's at. So that's usually all modeled in a 3D program like Max or Maya, and then import it in.
And then do you usually pull out all the interiors to kind of, you know, make the file more lightweight when working with it?
Back in KeyShot 1 I did, but I don't remove anything anymore.
Okay.
Just to give you a little idea, one vehicle with all kinds of trims and stuff, you're looking at, 10K or a 20 gig or 10 gig file, KeyShot file. And KeyShot runs buttery smooth.
Great. One question people had is on actual automotive light material, so headlights, tail lights, accent lights, and how you approach those. Okay,
that's a good question. So once I get my base lighting down, let me just go to here. So now that, we'll just say this is the lighting that I wanted. What I will do next is I will add a IES light. Do we have time? Can I just do it real quick? Okay, so I'm gonna add an IES light. And with these IES lights, I am only using them to enhance the image, not light the image. I can't stress that enough. Again, these are just the subtleties that helped with the image. So I usually put a sphere in there. Let me go to my library, go to materials, go to lights. I go to my go-to light that I usually use almost on everything when I use an IES light. No. And then let me just turn this up a little bit so we can all see what's happening. And we'll go back to my angle. So with this IES light, I am only going to be using it to pull out subtleties of the car, the shape. So if I turn this light off, you know, it looks nice, but it's still, you don't quite know what's happening in here. How does this sheet metal bend and turn and get to the wheel well? And how does it go down in here? You're kind of missing this little crater where the light sits in. So if you add a little IES light, that helps pull out these little surfaces and changes of the sheet metal. And obviously this would be more of a white light, or it all depends on my scene. And I might move that up higher so it spreads out more. But these lights are just put in there just for little accents to pull out shape, more shape.
Yeah, you can really see it in the headlight. And so if you wanted to actually, you know, make the headlights themselves kind of have brightness, like, you know, to mimic the headlight being on or turn, or, you know, the rear tail.
Okay. I got you.
How would someone do that?
Yep, got it. So what I'm going to do, again, it's the same idea, but this time I am going to be using this light for purposes of lighting. Turn that down. I would make spheres. And then I would move that down, and that's what's going to be reflecting onto the ground. And the only thing I'm doing inside this light is I want to mimic that the light is on. So I will put a bulb or a sphere inside the glass, turn that on. Let me hit OK here. Hide. Oop. All right. Darn it. Hide part. Just for explanation purposes, I'm going to turn this glass into a area light. Now this area light, again, depending on how it's reflecting and refracting, I'll either have it on really strong, or I might have it just at 10, because I just want to simulate that the lights are on. What's giving the light the look is this light hitting the ground. Now, to add a little bit more realism to it, you can add a scatter medium, put a square, a block in here, add a scatter medium, and play with the density, and that will start showing some of the beam. But I usually do that in post, to be quite honest with you, just due to, not that KeyShot can't do it, because it can. It's just that it's faster for me to do it in post than wait for the render. You know, time is very important to us. So even though it can be done in a program, sometimes we'll do it in another application just because it's quicker, you know, time management type of thing.
Great. And so a couple of questions about that scene is what's the black background you're using in that studio shot? And then also, how are you managing the plane under the car? Is there a special material you're using to kind of get those reflections?
Okay. So the material is the ground material. That has nothing, I didn't do anything to that, except when the ground comes in, it's going to be pure black, and it will be zero reflection. So it looks like nothing happened when you apply a ground plane. What I will usually do, if I don't have squish on the tires, this is a cheat. If you turn clipping plane on, and let's move this ground plane up, you can actually, you know, cut the car. So we'll usually put a ground plane in there, and then we cut a little bit of the tire just to show that there's weight to the car. If it's not modeled in there, we usually don't like tires modeled with squish, just because if you want to do animation, then you would have a flat thing moving around and around. Of course, that's not what you want. So you can cheat that by using a ground plane. Now, how do I get reflections on that ground plane? I am going to go to the ground material. I'm going to make this white. And now you can see that there's a reflection now because it's the specular is a color now. And now I'm just going to add a little bit of roughness to it, and that will determine how much fall off I have on the reflection. And then you also can mess around with the contrast. And that usually helps when you have lighter backgrounds and this kind of fades away. So let me switch that over to a lighter background. Okay. So if I go back to the default, you don't really see a reflection because you're on, a white background. But if you add just a little contrast to it, let that res up, you can start seeing the car come into light. So that's when I would use the contrast, depending on your color background. Also, don't be afraid to use the coves, because you can bounce light off the coves, and that gives you nice effects of light going around the car and also bounce light into the car and be a collusion type of stuff.
It's great. One person was asking just if you very quickly sort of show how you get that black light again, sort of how you got that kind of darker contrast light set up over on the left-hand side.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So all that is, go back to the map. Under your HDR editor, I created a light. Where is it? I gotta find it first. There we go. Okay. Let me just turn that off. I'm gonna start from scratch. So I'm going to add a light, and right now that light is set to add. So it's throwing light into the scene. What I'm gonna do is turn that into an alpha. Right now, the alpha it made no difference because the alpha is at pure white, so it's showing 100% light. If I make the brightness of that light to 0, it turns it into black, or it takes out all light. Now I'm going to click on this area to move the light, because I can move it by clicking. And then you just move that into a position that you like, and that's subtracting light away from the dome to give you these hard and light type scenarios. It also can be done with the other the gradation light. So again, we can use this light. This is kind of neat because since this light has a opacity to it, meaning that the top of the light is pure, there's no light at all, and at the bottom it's pure. If I turn this into a alpha and get rid of all light, now you can see that this particular alpha, it's black here, and it does have a nice gradation because there's no pixels in here, so you do have light showing through. So you can get some nice effects that way too, especially if you cut the light in half, and then you can mess around with the rotate, and that's these are the small fine details. What makes lighting is these small enhancements and changing. And there's no easy explanation of how to do it, except you just need to do it. And after you do it over and over again, you get it into a rhythm and you have your own process. It's easier for me to tell you what these lights do, but it's hard to tell me where to put them. There's no easy answer to that.
Well, and I love what you talked about with the idea of moving the eye, right, and kind of understanding what you're trying to achieve with the image as you're doing it.
Yes.
And kind of where you want your highlights to be, and kind of artistically where you want the user to kind of move their eye around. So some people are asking about kind of general lighting sessions. So if you go on our YouTube page, there are, we recently had our virtual KeyShot world. There were 2 sessions, one on kind of lighting basics and one on lighting advanced. If you really want to Tim's point, understand more about the tools themselves and environment lighting and HDR lighting, I recommend strongly that you check out those YouTube videos to really get a full understanding of lighting. And then I think when you come back and sort of see, how an expert like Tim does it, you can kind of understand how he uses all those tools to, as he says, kind of, get that look that he's trying to achieve through, expertise, but also trial and error and an artist's eye.
Yep.
One question folks were asking is, so you have this set up, now you want to do it, say, an XR render. How does something like that change your lighting in terms of, simplifying things for something like an XR?
Okay, so again, that's a really good question. There's 2 ways of handling that. One way is very difficult. The other way is a little bit easier. if I'm going to do an XR and I want this thing to be spinning around, I will actually do the spin. You can do the XR where the dome stays stationary, but the part moves. So I will light it for that angle. So this is the angle, right? So you can control the XR by telling it to either have the dome rotate with it or have it stationary. If you have the dome rotate with your scene, when you, let me apply this. So as you can see, the lighting's changing, right? It's brighter on this side, and then as you get to this side, it gets dark. And I think that's where a lot of the questions come in. How do I fix that? If the client, if we're doing a 360 and the environment is spinning with it, we have to light the car. So even on this side, we have to manipulate the HDR to bring out some of these highlights of the car. If it's a XR and it's a studio type lighting, there's no environment rotating with it, you know, you see buildings moving with it, then we would do a stationary lighting, meaning we will light this vehicle just like you do in photography on products, a 3-point lighting system, let's just say. And now the part or the car will move, but the lighting stays. So that lighting is consistent throughout the whole spin. So there's a couple different ways of attacking that. If you do it with the HDR, again, there's a lot of work to do with your lighting. And what's really hard to get to explain to the clients is not every frame of the XR is going to be perfect. And then explain to them that people aren't viewing it as here's a frame, here's a frame, here's a frame. They're actually viewing it, moving it around so that the lighting, even though it doesn't look perfect at this angle, it's okay because the car is in motion. That's very hard to get that point across because a lot of times they're like, well, this frame, I don't like the lighting over here. And then you got to go in there and you try to fix the lighting. There's a lot of education and there is a little bit of work there.
Great. And so kind of we're over time here. So I'll go to one last question for you to wrap up. So one person's asking, I think you kind of touched this a bit, but kind of deciding how much you do in KeyShot versus what you kind of save for post. Is there kind of any sort of, hard and fast rule where certain things like the light beam of the headlights, you'll focus more on post, or is it really just on a kind of per asset, per job basis?
It's another good question. So in my younger years, when I first started in CG, I did a lot of fixing in post. I do not do that anymore. The software has come such a long way that I can get a scene 95 to 98% done. So in post, all I'm doing is enhancing the image. So I will try to do everything I can to get it in the render. The reason for that is the industry right now is everyone needs everything very quickly. So if I do a product or a vehicle, because we do a lot of product stuff too, and I get that almost 100% with the render, if the client comes back to me 6 months from now, I know all I have to do is open up that scene, switch out whatever part's been updated, I can hit render, and I can get that project back out to the client very quickly. If I did a lot of post work, now I have to pull out my old PSDs, and then I got to try to remember everything I did to fix all the issues that I had in my lighting or my materials. So the answer is I do as little post as possible. Lights I will always add to enhance them or add a little bit of smoke to areas just so you can tell that there's a light on. But for the most part, it's done in KeyShot.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yeah. One final softball question for you. Are you using the GPU rendering in KeyShot 9? And what do you think of it?
No. I use CPU. That's where all my horsepower is at on on our machines. I have a nice graphics card. For me, I still like the look of a CPU. It's reliable. It's always there. It works every time. GPU, while you get great results, it gets a little finicky at times, and I just don't have time to be playing with updating drivers and stuff. But so yeah, to answer your question, this type of work is all CPU. Obviously, if we get into when we do XR and VR stuff, we're all GPU. But wherever I can, I use CPU.
Great. Well, and that's why KeyShot's great, because you have your choice either way.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, Tim, thank you so much. As we mentioned, everyone, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is on there. All of our great content is on there. If you want to learn more about KeyShot, either in terms of a feature basis, like things like lighting, or on a more industry basis, like Tim is showing about, the specifics of how to get great automotive renderers, cannot recommend enough to join our channel. I want to thank Tim again from KeyShot Studios. If you need any assistance, if you're someone out there who needs additional help setting assets up or outsourcing renders, as you can see, Tim truly is a KeyShot ninja. So please check out KeyShotStudios.com for further information. We thank all of you for joining, especially Tim, and we will see you again next month.
Thank you.